A very warm welcome to all the students who are joining us for the second video in the cybersecurity series. Actually, this video is going to be split into two parts. In this first part, we are going to look at a high-level overview of hacking, and in the next part we are going to do a deep dive on penetration testing and ethical hacking, and we'll try to gain insights into what activities are involved, what things you have to do, what are the efforts you need to put in, and so on, if you want to become a penetration tester or ethical hacker. So let's dive right in. Okay, so now let's look at some hard facts. uh, Now, all systems that have ever been built, there could be a combination of hardware and software, or just hardware or just software. So these things are built on assumptions, and naturally they have limitations. And all these systems are built by humans, and humans make mistakes. There's no human that hasn't made a mistake. Therefore, in theory, all software and or hardware could be buggy. So what is it that makes a difference between one system to another? So it is testing. It is clearly testing. So the more testing that a system undergoes, the more stable it becomes, the more mature it becomes, and so on. So it is obvious that any system is actually built as a iterative thing. So it is an iterative process through which any system is built, even initially, and then it has improved over time and so on. So you can't just take something that you want to build and then like build it to a good level of quality and reliability in some kind of overnight miracle. That's not practically possible, and that's the truth. So that brings us to the question, what exactly is hacking? Now, you have heard of this in the news, or you might have heard it from your friends, or you heard it around. Uh, so the idea is that if you have a system, again, this could be just hardware or just software or a combination of both. If you exploit in the sense of if you misuse it in ways that it's not supposed to be used, then that becomes hacking. So for example, maybe there are restrictions that you shouldn't be using it this way, but you go ahead and you use it in exactly that way which is forbidden by the developers. Or maybe there was some functionality which was never foreseen by the developers, but you go ahead and you use it in those unforeseen ways. Or maybe there's functionality that was never properly defined or properly developed by the developers of the system, but you go ahead and you kind of still use it in those incomplete ways. Or maybe there are certain actions or certain functionalities that are deemed dangerous and therefore disabled by the developers, but you go ahead and enable these features, or you use them in those exact dangerous ways. So all of this is considered hacking. So you can do this at the hardware and or software level. Now, to begin with, let's look into a couple of hardware level hacking examples. Starting with one of the most famous examples that I would like to discuss here, which is actually the case of Sony BMG audio CDs that were manufactured and sold in the market back in the early 2000s. I'm talking roughly 24-25 years ago. So there is this concept of digital rights management, also known as DRM. So for the first time, Sony had implemented this mechanism in its audio CDs. So if you took any of these DRM protected audio CDs and you put them into a normal CD player or a DVD player, they would just play normally and you wouldn't notice any difference. But the moment you took a Windows desktop or a laptop with a CD drive or a DVD drive, and you just insert the CD into the drive. Now, whether you have the intention of CD ripping, that is copying the songs from the CD onto your hard disk, or not, okay, so irrespective of your intention, A tiny little program hidden inside the audio CD would silently and without notifying you or informing you in any manner install itself onto your Windows desktop or laptop. Each of these DRM protected CDs was mastered in two sections. One section contained the songs which you could play through any CD or DVD player or CD drive, DVD drive installed on your desktop or laptop which is running the Windows operating system. Now it's the other section of the CD which contained a tiny little program that is actually called a rootkit, and that would install itself silently as a Windows service on your desktop or laptop, which meant that even if you restarted your device, it would come back into the memory and do its thing. Now, what was its thing? What was it supposed to do? It was supposed to, every time that you tried to copy the songs from the CD onto your computer or laptop's hard disk, it would actively prevent you from doing so. This was its job. Now, as time went by, hackers eventually figured out what was happening, and obviously they started thinking as to how to defeat this mechanism. So, over a period of time, two different techniques specifically came out. So, as per the first technique, all you had to do was cut a piece of electrician tape, not the transparent one, but the opaque variety, about 1.5 inch in length, and you stick it at any location but on the outer edge of the CD, and that was it. So for the second technique, all you needed was a simple felt tip marker, the one that you can use to write on glass or plastic or even CDs. So you just take the CD, you flip it onto the side which the data is read by the laser, and at the outer edge of the CD you draw an opaque solid fill track that is about 1 inch thick, and that's about it. So, using any one of these two techniques, ultimately what has happened is that you have an audio CD which has this piece of tape at the outer edge, or it has this solid track which you have drawn at the outer edge, both of which are about about an inch in thickness. And you have done this on the side which is read by the laser, right? And what happens is, now because of this obstruction, that is the piece of tape or the solid track which you have drawn, because of this obstruction, the CD reader, the laser, is no longer able to read that particular piece of content, and therefore skips it and just moves on to the songs, which means that the rootkit doesn't load, because that part of the CD is not readable, and therefore the mechanism is defeated. As simple as that. The second hardware level hacking example that I would like to give you here is what is called the Sony PS2 mod chip hack. Coincidentally, again, another Sony product. So what is this? As you see in the screenshot, this is a Sony PS2 stock motherboard to which some changes have been made. So you see that I've highlighted in the red color. You see some kind of yellow colored PCB with some chips on it, and then some black and white wires which are soldered to different parts of the motherboard. So what you see here is actually a modified Sony PS2 motherboard. This yellow colored chip, you can get it online, then it's just a bunch of wires, do a bit of soldering and you're done. That's it. And the hack is ready. So what is it that the hack achieves in the first place? Two things. So one is that the Sony PS2 console was manufactured on a region basis, right? And the DVDs also were manufactured on region basis. So you couldn't, for example, play a DVD from a different region on a console belonging to a different region, right? So this mod chip hack allowed this restriction to be bypassed. So in essence, if you had a modified PS2 motherboard with this hack on it, you could essentially play any DVD from any region without any restrictions. And the second, you can say, enhancement was that the Sony PS2 allowed only games to be played via the officially purchased DVD, but with with a motherboard that has been hacked using this mod chip hack. Uh, it had, I mean, the Sony PS2 offered two USB slots, so you could plug in an external SSD or an external hard disk with a custom bootloader using which you boot the console, and you could also have any number of games copied on the external SSD or hard disk. So you could just boot the console from the SSD or hard disk and then start playing the games on it without ever needing one of the official DVDs, the game DVDs, I mean. We now arrive at the third and final hardware level hacking example. Of course, there are thousands of examples out there, but we don't have that kind of time. So this is going to be the final example for hardware level hacking here in this discussion. Now, there is a concept of CPU overclocking, which is actually a dangerous scenario. So, what is this dangerous scenario? What makes it dangerous, and how does hacking help us to handle that dangerous scenario and get the job done? That's what we are going to look at now. If you consider a computer or smartphone motherboard, okay, let's go with a computer motherboard in this case. Now, it obviously contains a CPU and GPU, which are the most important chips on the motherboard and also the most heat producing as well. Now, if you keep operating heavy workloads like 3D gaming or AI workloads, which you get in the recent years, or video processing, and if you keep running these workloads continuously for, let us say, half an hour, 1.5 hour without a break, right, obviously the system is going to get hot. More specifically, the CPU and GPU are obviously going to heat up, and if you don't manage the heat, then there's a danger that these chips might actually melt, and the system, that's it's a write-off. You can just like toss it away. So we need a mechanism to manage the heat efficiently, and for the previously mentioned workloads, the temperature can go anywhere between 70 to 100 degrees or even higher, and that's really hot. In many cases, there will actually be a demand for CPU and GPU processing power, because only then the application will work properly, which means non-stop CPU and GPU operation, so that you get that kind of peak processing power, but which clearly means that the faster these chips work, the hotter they get. So how then do you actually solve this problem in the first place? And that brings us to the concept of liquid nitrogen cooling. So you get these ready-made kits in the market which you can buy and install in your CPU cabinet. Of course, some parts go into the motherboard. So ultimately, it's a piping system, and you just run liquid nitrogen through this system, and that brings down the temperature drastically. And the technique is so efficient that, as you see in the screenshots, instead of the danger of excessive heat, you actually have ice being formed in there. Believe me, look at the screenshots and judge for yourself. It really gets that cold, and you can imagine the drastic reduction in the system temperature. Now, overall, what is it that has been achieved? Well, the concept of CPU overclocking. Uh, let's say you have a CPU that is rated for maximum 3 gigahertz, but using this liquid nitrogen cooling technique, you run it at 5 gigahertz, 7 gigahertz. In fact, the world record is actually 9 gigahertz plus. You can imagine, if you have a maximum 3 gigahertz speed rating processor running at 9 gigahertz without temperature management, it's going to melt. That's a bloody disaster. And 9 gigahertz plus is blazingly fast, and that obviously is going to generate a tremendous amount of heat, which, thanks to this liquid nitrogen cooling technique, is efficiently managed. Anyway, so as you can see in the pics, the overall system temperature when it is operating at these workloads, and that, with the temperature being managed and so on, would be anywhere between 10 to 25 degrees maximum, 15, 20, anywhere in that range. So overall, using just this one technique, what is it that has been achieved? You see, you have achieved CPU overclocking, you have achieved temperature management, you have achieved peak performance from your CPU and GPU, even though they were actually less maximum speed rated, right? So this is actually a textbook example for hardware level hack, and it's pretty famous. Now that we are done with the hardware level hacking examples, let's quickly jump into the software level hacking examples. Now you might already be familiar with most of these, if not all of them, but let's just quickly look at them at a high level. So the first example I would like to quote is the Windows operating system related hacks and cracks and whatnot that is available online. So ideally, you haven't purchased a genuine version of the Windows operating system, but applying these hacks and cracks to a pirated copy somehow makes it as if it's the genuine thing. I'm pretty sure you might already be knowing all this. So anyway, this is a good example of software level hacking. A similar situation exists as far as 2D and 3D games are concerned. Ideally, you should be paying money for getting the official copies of these games for your PC or laptop, but you very well know that there are pirated versions out there which you simply download, and then you apply these patches which are basically hacks or cracks which are developed by hackers to unlock the game and then bypass the licensing mechanism and so on. So typically, this is what happens is that a game is published, and then after some time, hackers release these patches, which then people use and so on to unlock the game fully and play it. And the next example is the same story that you have just heard but applied to software. So you had names like 3D Max Studio and Maya. These were pretty popular for being pirated back in the day. I don't know if they are still around. You had companies that published these software versions, and after some time, hackers would release patches to bypass the restrictions and licensing mechanism. And the last example that we are going to talk about are what are called as game cheats, and you have plenty of games out there, pretty famous, single player versus CPU or multiple player games, games like PUBG, Battle Royale, Valorant, and so on. So ultimately, you have the concept of what are called as game, software patches or cheat codes or secret key combinations and so on. Uh, all of them ultimately are to give you unfair advantages like, I don't know, unlimited health, or you never run out of med packs, or you never get killed. The enemy, no matter what they do, there's no damage, or you get unlimited ammo. You never run out of bullets and so on. Ultimately, these are all unfair advantages, and that's why they are called game cheats. So obviously you need these game cheats to gain unfair advantages when you're playing these games, and of course these are pretty famous too, so especially in the context of online games and so on. uh, so these are some of the examples of software level hacking that I wanted to briefly discuss. Obviously we have just scratched the surface. There's many more examples out there, but we kind of wrap up software level hacking at this point. All right, so we are done with the intro to hacking thing at this point, so let's move ahead. As I mentioned before, if you have a system which is pure hardware or pure software or a combination of the two, and you are hacking it, so in other terms, you're misusing it, or you're using it in ways that could result in a dangerous scenario, or you're using it in ways that are not permitted or not foreseen by the developers, etc., the stuff that we have seen previously. So it could be one or more of these. The bigger question here is, why is it that you're doing this? Why are you misusing the system like this? So the answer to that is known only to you. Let me explain myself with a few simple examples. Now, let's say you have a revolver, or you buy a revolver. You could use it for self-defense or to threaten someone. Similarly, you have a kitchen knife. You could use it to cut vegetables or to threaten someone. So what I'm trying to tell you is, like, hacking is like, say, fire, right? Or the knife or the revolver that we just discussed. So it is ultimately a capability. It is a skill set, right, that you develop with plenty of effort and time and so on. So having done this, right, whether you use that for doing good or you use that for doing bad is something that is left to you. So it all depends on what is your morality and so on. But obviously this discussion here is not to judge you and your morality and your values and so on. This is purely a technical discussion, so we are going to move ahead from here. We are now going to start looking into these two, well, you can call them skill sets or job specs or whatever, but ultimately penetration testing and ethical hacking. So we are going to look at what activities are involved, what is it that you have to do to prepare yourself, and what has to be done ultimately if you want to be an ethical hacker or a penetration tester in the future. And this discussion is going to be pretty much detailed. Let's jump in right away. So to get started with this deep dive into penetration testing and ethical hacking, I would actually like to start with an example just to make things easier to understand. Now, as you see in this slide, so we have the preparation, which is the first stage. We have then penetration testing, which is the second stage, and finally we have hacking, which is the third stage, right? As you see in this diagram. Now, the example which I was just referring to earlier that I would give you is now. All right. So, you have Indian citizens, and as per the Constitution of India, these citizens have two things: rights and duties. You can't have one without the other. So, similarly, if your intention is to become an ethical hacker or a penetration tester, then it is your duty to start preparing appropriately, right? And so that is exactly what is here in this diagram, the preparation stage. That is exactly what that is. And as you see, there are many activities that are part of this practice stage. So you spend time doing them, you get familiar with the process, and then based on your confidence, at some point you move to the next stage, which is penetration testing. Again, that involves many activities, as you can see. Now, as you spend time again on those activities, you gain familiarity and confidence and comfort level with the tools involved and so on. Again, based on your confidence, you will move on to the next stage, which is hacking. Now, in this case, I mean, for this video, we are going to limit ourselves to ethical hacking. Of course, there's so many aspects of hacking involved, but those are for future videos. For this video, it is just ethical hacking. That's it. Now, just to reiterate, the topmost box here that you see is called the preparation stage because that is from where this whole thing begins. That is why it's called the preparation stage. Just to give you an example, let's say you want to join the police force as an inspector. Now, the moment you get selected into the course, not that the very first day they're going to throw you into a murder case or a criminal investigation. No, there is going to be a proper training for you first. Only then will your duty actually start, obviously. Now, the police training obviously consists of things like discipline, drill, physical fitness, and shooting skills. So, only after you finish all this, then you get your posting, and then you are handed over criminal cases, investigations, and so on, and then you get into full-fledged duty, right? So, similarly, here you have the preparation stage where there's plenty of stuff to be done, plenty of activities, plenty of effort to be done, time to be invested, and so on. And once you're confident, then you move on to the penetration testing stage. Again, there's plenty of stuff to get done there, plenty of effort to put in, plenty of time that you need to invest, right? And after which you will move to the the ethical hacking stage. Now, before we move on to the second part of this video, I would like to remind you that irrespective of whether you want to be a penetration tester or an ethical hacker or a cyber security researcher, or pick up any other job spec or career that is related to these things, any of these, whatever it is, the absolute zero, right, the starting point for all of that is right here in the slide. So no matter which of these cyber security career options you pick, or which topic you want to explore, or whichever skill set you want to pick up, you will have to follow surely the steps that have been outlined in this slide. That is, you start with the preparation stage, you do all the activities in there, you gain a certain level of confidence, then you move ahead to penetration testing, you do the activities there, gain a lot of confidence, then you move to the ethical hacking stage. Again, there's plenty of stuff to do. Again, you put in time and effort there, gain plenty of confidence. Now, of course, there's many other topics that we will explore, but surely not in this video. The preparation stage, which has so many activities like reading, practice, coding, learning, and procuring equipment. And let's look at how you might actually go about these activities, right? So, for example, you start with reading, and just the theory won't do, so you'll have to practice. Now, as you practice, you figure out that maybe you're lacking the understanding, so you go back to reading, and then again back to practice, right? At some point you realize that, I need to have some kind of tool for this, so you start building it yourself, that is, you code it yourself, or you take somebody else's code and you start from there. At some point you run it and you check it and you realize that you could use it in some other way, or maybe you're still lacking clarity, so you go back to practice. So all these activities that you see in the preparation stage, this box, well, actually what I'm trying to say is that you may have to do them in any order. There's no specific order with which you go. This may be in any order. That's the point. Similarly, look at the penetration testing stage. Say you start with the enumeration, then at some point you'll go forward and start the vulnerability analysis. Maybe there you realize you might have missed something, so you go back to the enumeration stage. At some point, you're back to the vulnerability analysis. Then you think, okay, let's run some tests, right? Nothing comes out. So again, it is back to the vulnerability analysis and so on. These activities may occur in any order. And next, when you look into the hacking stage, for example, you have the run exploit step here, you try that, it didn't work out, you'll have to go back to the penetration testing stage. Maybe you missed something there, or you got confused, right? Again, you go back to the preparation stage, read. So overall, what I'm trying to tell you is across these stages, you see so many activities. So at any point of time, right, you could find yourself in any one of these stages, in any one of the activities, moving back and forth at random, based on what kind of situation you're facing. So that is the overall idea, and I hope I have explained myself clearly.